Jayom Vishnupad Paramhansa Paribrajakacharyasto Tarasata Shishimad A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem se kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinatha Shama Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai. Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Mayapur Dham Ki Jai. Jagannath Puri Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Shri Guru and Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Today we're reading from Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita Volume 1, Chapter 9, entitled A Resident of Vrindavan. Last week we began the reading of Srila Prabhupada's first major poem that he wrote in Bengali while he was residing in Vrindavan. After spending 2 years traveling, trying to develop the League of Devotees, he decided to return to Vrindavan and concentrate on writing to prepare for his momentous journey to the West, although he didn't know how he was going to get there at this time. So this poem, Vrindavane Bhajan, it's 108 couplets. Each stanza has 4 couplets. There are 27 stanzas. And last week we were able to complete only 9 of them because we were also singing the Bengali, because the Bengali is very melodious and there are some things that can't be understood in English that are only there in Bengali. But because we now have 18 stanzas to complete, that's 18 times 4, that's a lot to get through today. We'll try to complete the poem today. We ended off number 9, which is entitled The Wise Against the Poor. And Prabhupada here is introducing the wise as Arjuna and the poor as Duryodhana. These two, though on the same battlefield, were different. One was a friend of Krishna, the other a foe. So in the Bengali, that's Priya and Apriya. One was dear to Krishna and the other one was not dear. Persons who possess intelligence can clearly understand the difference. So now we'll go on to section 10. We're just going to read the translations. This one is called Understand and Fight, because now Srila Prabhupada, he's going into the Bhagavad Gita as an example of how we can understand who we really are, what our sambandha is with Krishna. Whoever knows the spirit soul's eternal relationship with Lord Krishna and fights the battle of life for his sake will survive, while all others will die. So here Prabhupada is describing in the Bhagavad Gita, anyone who was fighting for Lord Krishna, they lived, the Pandavas, and everyone else died. Whoever does not know this relationship with Krishna and foolishly runs down another path will never attain love for Krishna, but simply waste his entire life. First, properly understand your relationship with Krishna. That's the sambandh. And of course, in the Bengali, Prabhupada uses the word sambandh. Then your duties in relationship to him. That's the abhideya. And the ultimate goal of ecstatic love for him, the prayojana. Then, remaining firmly fixed in your alliance with Krishna, go and confidently fight the battle against Maya. So Prabhupada, he's taking the battlefield of Kurukshetra here with Arjuna and Duryodhana on the 2 different sides. And he's using Arjuna as an example that just as he fought, he wasn't inactive, he wasn't non-violent. No, he fought against Maya, which was a great battle at that time. Those who abandoned their devotional relationship with the Lord and try to become powerful within the realms of intellectual knowledge, that's Jnana Yoga, and fruit of action, Karma Yoga, both of which are described in Bhagavad Gita, but Prabhupada rejects them here, never attain liberation from the material world, but simply remain disturbed throughout their lives. So now Prabhupada is really getting to the core of what Krishna is teaching Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita and how we can apply that. Remember, Prabhupada is sitting all alone at the Bansi Gopal temple. What's going to happen to this poem, nobody knows. Even to this day, it's very hard to find it. But Prabhupada was pouring out his heart, and we'll see as we go on further, he gives all of the clues of what he's going to try to accomplish by carrying out the instructions of his spiritual master. So section 11 is entitled, Senses Uncontrollable by Yoga. In name only, yogis appear to be eminent and grave personalities, but actually they are constantly agitated by Maya. Hankering after material enjoyment, liberation, and mystic perfection, they are essentially uncontrolled. Unrestrained senses can never be subdued, even by the power of diligent yoga practice. How many great munis and yogis in the past have all been overwhelmed by sensual urges? Without serving Lord Rishikesh, master of the senses, they managed to subdue the senses only for a time. Eventually, they return to fruitive material activities and then suffer under Yamaraj, the god of death. Now, a little bit ahead, yes, in the next section, Prabhupada is going to describe the unsuccessful yogi in the beginning, that's Vishramita Muni, who at that time was Kaushik. He was trying for all these things. He wanted yoga siddhi. He wanted to become a greater yogi than Vishishta Muni. And he performed many, many severe austerities just for that purpose. But it was all egoistic. It was all for serving himself. There was no interest in pleasing the Supreme Lord. The senses can never be permanently restrained by performing physical yoga exercises. This is clearly explained in many places throughout the Agama and Purana scriptures. Now, section 12. There's no success without Krishna. Although the great sage Vishramitra was sitting and meditating in mystic trance, he still fell down from that yoga practice to unite with Menaka and begot a beautiful, pure daughter named Shakuntala. Now, Vishramitra Muni, he's used as an example of first he was unsuccessful in controlling his senses. And it wasn't just an ordinary fall down. Actually, they had become very attached to one another. Menaka had been sent to cause him to fall down by Indra because Vishramitra had become so powerful. He had even created his own Svarga. But after spending time together, Vishramitra and Menaka actually became attached to one another and then produced one child. Then Vishramitra Muni, he actually cursed Menaka that they would never be able, they would always be separated. And then again he went to perform very severe austerities, and Indra sent another Apsara, Ramba. Now this we don't hear so much about. At that time, Vishramitra Muni was determined he wasn't going to fall down as a result of lust. So what did he do? He became so angry that he cursed Ramba to become a rock, a stone, a Shila, for 1,000 years. So again he fell down, because simply by performing the yoga practice, one cannot overcome the urges of lust, anger, and greed. And that was the proof of it. So again he attempted for 1,000 years, again sat in meditation. Indra came, personally came in the form of a Brahmin. So there's so many tests. But for the devotee, there are no such tests because they're not trying to do anything except please Krishna. So there's no success without Krishna. In this way, the unsuccessful yogis fall down. And what to speak of the intellectual jnanis? As for the common karmis, grossly foolish like asses, they are perpetually afflicted with suffering. Those to whom Lord Krishna shows his mercy by personally giving instruction become equally as fortunate as the great devotee Arjuna. So this personal instruction, when Arjuna was inquiring from Krishna, because he also fell into illusion, he was thinking that these are my family members, how can I kill them? He wasn't thinking that what's going to please Krishna at the time. So all the instructions that Krishna gives to Arjuna, they are personal instructions that we can also take. And at the end of the Bhagavad Gita, when Sanjay, he's speaking to Dhritarashtra, he's in ecstasy actually, remembering this conversation and seeing Lord Krishna in his beautiful form, and Yogeshwar is Krishna, and then Arjun, the great archer, and he's delighting in their conversation. So when we read Bhagavad Gita also, we have to take this as personal instructions from the Supreme Lord so that we can also attain the same perfection in love that Arjuna attained by hearing Krishna's message. Those to whom Lord Krishna shows his mercy by personally giving instruction become equally as fortunate as the great devotee Arjuna. But whoever fights the battle of life for the sake of his own selfish pleasure dies, along with his entire dynasty, just like the foolish demon Duryodhana. So here, the translator, Dasarasutta, nowhere in the Bengali is Duryodhana called a demon, but he puts in the word demon because Duryodhana was simply fighting for his own selfish pleasure without any consideration of what Krishna desired. So the translator called him a demon, foolish demon. Text 13, the message of Bhagavad Gita. Whoever daily fights the battle of life only for Lord Krishna's sake discovers prosperity, mystic perfection, and transcendental knowledge in the palm of his hand. That means that when we're working for Krishna, all the things that the karmis and the jnanis and the yogis are aspiring for independently and they can't attain, automatically come into the palm of the hand of a devotee. And this was the ideal example of Arjuna. He had topmost knowledge, mystic perfection because he was with Yogeshwar, Sri Krishna, and prosperity. Well, they won the kingdom, although he wasn't interested in the kingdom, still Krishna gave them the kingdom. Oh brothers, take care to properly understand the transcendental message of the Bhagavad Gita. Then you will attain Lord Krishna's service and remain ever engaged in the worship of Sri Hari. So remember, in the beginning of this poem, Srila Prabhupada, he was calling out to Krishna and calling him brother. And then he turns his attention to us, the hearers of this poem. And he's giving us advice now. The Lord's devotees are richly endowed with all transcendental qualities. They hold no artificial worldly concepts such as ahimsa, nonviolence, and akrodha, freedom from anger. So here we can understand that the misconceptions of the Bhagavad Gita interpretations given by the present politicians in Prabhupada's day, he's now rejecting. That no, you won't find nonviolence in Bhagavad Gita. You won't find freedom from anger either, because Krishna was actually trying to stoke Arjuna's anger, because Duryodhana was doing something that was against Krishna's will. Using his devotees as instruments, Sri Hari gives instructions to the fallen souls. One such assistant of his is known as Partha, the son of Mother Prita. So that's Arjun. Section 14. Arjun surrenders to Krishna. Arjun had taken himself to be a conditioned soul bound by Maya. Thus the brother of the Pandavas behaved like one bewildered. Arjun expressed his lamentation thus: killing my family members and relatives, and afterward enjoying rulership of their kingdom, what kind of happiness will that bring me? So this was the background when Arjuna, in illusion, so-called illusion, of course, it was his deep compassion as a devotee. He didn't want to harm his own family members. But he had forgotten that first and foremost we have to find out what Krishna wants. Thus he displayed illusory bodily consciousness by imagining the bodies of others to be his kinsmen. Although he was a trained warrior, he left the battlefield out of sentimental affection for family members. Seeing Arjun's cowardly bewilderment, Lord Krishna personally chastised him. He used the word here is nindana. Nindana usually means when we offend someone, but it can also mean a chastisement. Thereafter, Arjun surrendered to Krishna and became his disciple. Section 15. The Bhagavad Gita destroys internal bondage. As Krishna's disciple, Arjun listened to the Lord's recitation of the Bhagavad Gita, hearing which surely destroys all ignorance and material bondage. Although Arjun's material bondage was destroyed, he never renounced the external world as a sannyasi does. Following his example, those who are householders can understand the true message of the Bhagavad Gita. So this is very important because Srila Prabhupada at this time, he was still in the Vanaprastha ashram. He hadn't yet taken sannyas. And one who's in the Grihastha ashram, the Vanaprastha ashram, their duties are different from those of sannyas ashram. And particularly because Arjun himself was a householder. The instructions given by Krishna to Arjuna were for those who were still in householder life, that you must perform your duty without attachment, even without attachment to your family members. And that non-attachment does not mean that we're callous to our family members. It means that we, along with all of our family members, act in a way to please Krishna. Now, the true message of Bhagavad Gita. There's a sloka, Bhagavad Gita 1873. It's the last words spoken between Arjun and Krishna. And Arjun says to Krishna, I am now firm and free from doubt, and am prepared to act according to your instructions. So the full sloka is Arjuna Uvacha, Nasto moha smitir labdha, tvat prasadan maya chuta, stitosmi gata sandeha, karisye vachanam tava. So these last words, I am now firm and free from doubt. That's, Prabhupada mentions that. Karisye vachanam tava. So these are the last words, because in 1872, Krishna asked Arjuna, have you heard my instructions? Now what are you going to do? And this is when Arjuna confirms to Krishna that yes, my illusion has been destroyed, and I now remember your instructions, and by your mercy, O Achyuta, Achyuta means infallible one, I am now fixed, and I have no more doubts. Karisye vachanam tave, I will now do as you have said. Arjun spoke this most perfect of mantras, and thus fought that battle and became forever famous. The Vaishnav devotees of the Lord are typically nonviolent and indifferent to the world. This is a quotation. This is not Srila Prabhupada speaking. This is what other people may think of the Vaishnavas. The Vaishnav devotees of the Lord are typically nonviolent and indifferent to the world. They simply chant holy names on their japa beads. How then can Arjuna, a warrior in the midst of worldly activity, be considered a devotee? Someone may ask. So this is oftentimes, even in the times of Lord Chaitanya and his followers, people would criticize that Lord Chaitanya has taken all of his followers and emasculated them. He's made them into women. They're just singing and dancing all the time. They don't engage in their duties anymore. So someone who doesn't understand the teachings of Krishna might think that all the devotees do, they just chant on their beads, they're not active in anything. When we try to give them a book or try to ask them to chant Hare Krishna, they'll say to us, go get a job. They don't understand the spiritual activities of devotional service. So then they may think, how can Arjuna be called a devotee? Because he's going to be fighting. He must not, either he's a warrior or he's a devotee. How can you be both? That's because they don't understand the principles of bhakti yoga. Section 16, true nature of a devotee. This is also in quotation. A Vaishnava is completely peaceful and simply spends his time chanting japa on his beads. Whoever speaks in this way only eats the mind's bananas. That's the manakola. He reaches a false conclusion based on external appearances. So, people who don't understand the nature of devotional service, they think that the devotees are simply chanting all day, they have nothing else to do, and therefore they're useless. A devotee of the Lord is naturally gentle in disposition and bears no malice towards other living beings. But that does not mean he is a weakling and possesses no valor, as many people foolishly think. Now Prabhupada gives the example. In the two great battles of ancient India, there were two great heroes. Both were exalted devotees of the Lord, and thus they were victorious. Now, who were those two great devotees? And what were those two battles? Yes. The first battle was in the Ramayana, and the great devotee was Hanuman. And the second devotee was in the Mahabharata at Kurukshetra. The second battle was at Kurukshetra, and that great devotee was Arjuna. They were both victorious, and they both fought any way they could to gain victory for their lords. It is known throughout the entire world that one who is a Vaishnava never fights a battle out of desires for personal sense gratification. The Pandavas, they were grieving. Yudhisthira, he could not come out of his grief, thinking that he was the cause of the death of so many living entities. And even Duryodhana blamed the entire war on Yudhisthira. He had no conception that it was actually his own fault, his own greed, his own desires for personal sense gratification that caused this war. But actually, Prabhupada explains in the purport to 1873 that finally Arjuna could understand Krishna's desire, that he wanted to reduce the population of unwanted people, and therefore he agreed to fight. So Krishna had a higher purpose, and finally, after hearing the full Bhagavad Gita, he understood that I should perform this duty for the pleasure of Krishna. This is not for my personal sense gratification. Section 17. A Vaishnava is not inactive. Those who have never seen a true Vaishnava mistakenly claim that a Vaishnava is inactive. Actually, a Vaishnava is always active, but only in the Supreme Lord's devotional service. So we have Srila Prabhupada as an example. Although he was sitting in his room very peacefully at the Bansi Gopal temple, he was busy 24 hours a day, not only meditating how to carry out his spiritual master's order, but he was actively engaged in preparing for that great takeoff when he would finally go and perform what his spiritual master asked him to do. He was writing. Day and night he was writing articles, poems, translating Bhagavad Gita, beginning to translate Srimad Bhagavatam, Nectar Devotion, Chaitanya Charitamrita. He was so busy writing different articles for the Gaudiya Patrika. Every way he could, he was active. He wasn't just sitting and chanting, although he was also chanting, because that's how we get our inner strength. The neophyte devotee, being bereft of true life, does not engage in such active devotional service to the Lord. Hoping to earn the reputation of a so-called sage, he pretentiously retires to a secluded cottage. Now, when we were reading the prelude to when this poem started in the Prabhupada Lilamrita, we noted that Srila Prabhupada, although he was living in Vrindavan, in seclusion, writing, also visiting the temples, he couldn't produce his Bhaktigadda at that time because he had no money. But he was seeing what was going on in Vrindavan. And here is when Prabhupada begins his critique of what is actually happening in Vrindavan and what has to be corrected. And this is, to this day, the same things are going on. And we have to work very hard to correct these things. Srila Nityananda Rai is worshipable by all devotees because even when he was physically attacked by the degraded souls Jagai and Madhai, he simply bestowed upon them ecstatic love of God. Now Nityananda Rai, he was actively going out and preaching every day with Haridas Thakur. They were Sankirtan partners. And even though he had been attacked by Jagai and Madhai, he simply wanted to give them love of God. Lord Gaurhari had angrily raised his Sudarshan disc to kill those envious offenders of the Vaishnavas. But by Lord Nityananda's mercy, they were transformed into Vaishnavas. So this is the true Nityananda Vanks. Those who go out and approach all the Jaghais and Madhais and make them into devotees. Section 18, Vaishnavas actively show mercy. Showing the ideal example himself, Lord Chaitanya engaged in preaching to the fallen souls. Those who attempt to worship him in a solitary place verily cheat themselves. The whole world has now filled up with countless Jagais and Madhais needing deliverance, but many in the lineage of Lord Nityananda are simply busy increasing the number of their disciples. So Prabhupada's beginning his attack. The Nityananda Vanks. Nityananda Vanks is also here in Vrindavan. I got a letter just a few days ago from one new bhakta. He said, I don't know what to do. He said, there's ISKCON, should I take initiation in ISKCON, or there's the Nityananda Vanks that's here. And they tell me that ISKCON has ruined everything because they're initiating non-Brahmins. And they showed me the slokas in the scriptures that say only Brahmins can be initiated. So I don't know which way to go. So I gave him an example that was Haridas Thakur a Brahmin? Was Ramananda Rai a Brahmin? These were the closest associates of Lord Chaitanya. And then he sent me back a smiley. Because you can't follow Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda without embracing all the Jaghais and Madhais, the most fallen souls, and making them into devotees. But here, Prabhupada is this Nityananda Vangs. They're simply busy increasing the number of their disciples. Eating and sleeping nicely, enjoying the good life, they remain free from personal inconvenience. So maybe that's why this poem wasn't made so public, because Prabhupada's really thrashing into the different anomalies that are going on here in Vrindavan. But for a true Vaishnava, it is unacceptable to live without actively showing mercy to fallen souls. In his wonderful book, Madhurya Kadambini, Part 1, Sloka 3, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur has made this principle clear. Just see his profound judgment. So now section 19, Prabhupada is going to quote from Vishwanath Chakravarti. The Lord serves the preachers. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur states that the main feature of bhakti is that it is causeless, ahaituki. It manifests only of its own accord. Although bhakti is an eternally perfect substance, it lies dormant deep within every soul. The middle-class devotee, the madhyamadikari, always extends mercy towards others. Being compassionate to innocent, childlike souls, he endeavors to awaken their dormant bhakti. So this is the preacher, the madhyamadikari. Even the uttama adhikaris, such as Srila Prabhupada, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, they come down to the madhyamadikari level so that they can awaken the dormant bhakti, which is deep within every soul. The Supreme Lord himself comes under the control of such a true devotee. Being enchanted with the devotee's merciful nature, the Lord always follows his lead. Mugdha is enchanted. The Lord becomes enchanted by his own devotee. A Vaishnava is able to reawaken the sleeping material universe. Indeed, by his magnanimous mercy, sinful souls are transformed into devotees. Now this is what Srila Prabhupada used to say, I have to spend gallons of blood to make one person into a devotee. Because who was he preaching to? The lowest of the low, the mlechas, the yavanas. He was praying to Krishna when he reached America. He said, you must have some reason for calling me here. Otherwise, why would you bring me to this Ugrastan, this horrible place? Because he saw that all the people, they were simply under the modes of passion and ignorance. So this is the compassionate nature of a real devotee that enchants the Supreme Lord himself. A Vaishnava is able to reawaken the sleeping material universe. Indeed, by his magnanimous mercy, sinful souls are transformed into devotees. Section 20. Now Prabhupada's going to get heavy. Therefore, the true devotee never abandons preaching work to engage in solitary worship, nirjan bhajan. Such behavior of a neophyte devotee will cheat the entire world. So Srila Prabhupada is stating in this stanza that those who perform nirjan bhajan are the neophyte devotees. Once I observed a group of supposedly famous Vaishnavas who held big devotional titles. A British Christian missionary came to Vrindavan and met with them at their assembly. We had heard this story earlier, so this is where Prabhupada is describing it. The priest asked those persons to explain the pastimes that Sri Krishna performed in Vrindavan. Particularly, he was challenging that how can the Supreme Lord Krishna dance with other men's wives? But in that entire gathering of so-called famous devotees, no one could explain to him the truth of the Lord's pastimes. All those big devotees were actually just neophytes who had no proper understanding of the scriptures. Engaging in their troublesome and pretentious solitary worship, they are simply concerned about their next meal. Now, the way it is in the Bengali is roti chana. They're just looking for roti and chana, that's chickpeas. That's their next meal. And you can find them all over Vrindavan. They have their bags. They go from one ashram, one home to the next. They fill up their bags with, they'll have 20 rotis. And they still go on begging. Then they'll exchange those rotis for something else. Just interested in filling their belly for their next meal. Section 21. So here we have Prabhupada attacking the Nirjan Bhajananandis, and then all these great Vaishnavas who have big titles, who could not satisfy the British Christian missionary who came to Vrindavan. And now he's talking about the Babas, the sadhus, who simply go begging for their next meal. Prabhupada sees everything. Section 21, the topmost devotee is glorious. My Gurudev boldly declared, this is a quote, all these Babajis in Braja are neophytes. Today I have finally understood the resounding truth of what he said. Because Prabhupada didn't, before the 2 years previously, although he had his room in Bansi Gopal temple, he didn't have time to live there because he was traveling and preaching the whole time. Bombay, Kanpur, Delhi, sometimes Vrindavan, then back again to Bombay, then to Delhi again. Now he's here, and he sees now what his spiritual master was speaking about these Babajis. Now Prabhupada's quoting from the Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya Lila, 2265. One who is expert in the conclusions of the revealed scriptures and who has firm faith in Lord Krishna is classified as a topmost devotee, Uttama Adhikari. He can deliver the whole world. So the Kanishta, the Madhyam, and the Uttama Adhikari is based on faith and knowledge. The Kanishta Adhikari, he has a little bit of faith, but he doesn't have enough knowledge, so that faith can easily be broken. The Madhyam Adhikari, he has stronger faith, but does not know all of the conclusions of the scriptures yet. But his faith cannot be shaken. And then finally, the Uttama Adhikari has unbroken faith and full knowledge of all the Shastras. That's the definition of Uttama Adhikari. My spiritual master is famous throughout the universe as the savior of the fallen. His fame will surely increase if he can deliver someone as fallen as me. This is Srila. Now, we say the same thing about Srila Prabhupada. And every disciple, they feel the same way about their spiritual master. That if my spiritual master can deliver a fallen soul such as myself, then his fame will be spread all throughout the universe. Even the great Vaishnavas in their poems, Raghunath Das Goswami, Narottam Das Thakur, they all pray like that. They consider themselves to be most fallen, and their spiritual master, he was able to pick them up. In this degraded age of Kali Yuga, all the souls are fallen and wretched. Although looking with their eyes, they cannot see the actual situation of anything in this illusory world. So that's the spiritual master. He awakens the disciple through the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita so that they can engage in Krishna's service. Section 22. Devotees do not imitate the Lord. Sri Gaurasundar, the beautiful Supreme Personality of Godhead, is the most magnanimous personality. His nectarian instructions to us are sweet and profound to hear. His instruction was that whoever has taken birth in the holy land of India should please work for the benefit of others. So Srila Prabhupada in Bengali, he gives a summary of that sloka. The sloka is Chaitanya Charitamrita Adi Leela 941. Bharata bhumite hoila manusya janma jar, janma sartaka kari karo para upakar. One of the Lord's own pastimes was to remain in solitude, tasting and relishing transcendental topics. But it is never the devotee's practice to imitate the Lord's confidential pastimes. So what the Lord is instructing to us is to do para upakar. Anyone born within India, they should do this para upakar, work for the benefit of others. Although, of course, Lord Chaitanya, that's why he took sannyas, for the benefit to benefit others. He traveled and preached. He preached amongst his devotees. He enthused them. Just at the very end of his life, he went into solitude. But it is never the devotee's practice to imitate the Lord's confidential pastimes. When the devotees engage in the activities of devotional service, they never attempt to personally relish nectar as the Lord did. Tasting and relishing transcendental pastimes is actually impossible for those covered by a dull material body. So we have to remember this, because a lot of times if you step outside of ISKCON, and Prabhupada said that within the four walls of our temple is a whole spiritual world. But if by accident or by mistake you step outside, you'll hear people say that, no, Bhaktivedanta Swami, he didn't give you everything. You have to take Siddha Pranali. You have to find out who you really are. You have to engage in as a manjari. But what's actually being said here is, tasting and relishing transcendental pastimes is actually impossible for those covered by a dull material body. Our duty is to serve our spiritual master. Section 23, caste consciousness condemned. One who is deluded by gross bodily consciousness identifies with the material body. While trapped in this temporary covering, no one can ever relish transcendental enjoyment as the Lord did. There are some persons who shamelessly judge the Lord's devotees in terms of their caste or external bodily nature. But these same critics consider themselves quite expert in relishing transcendental pastimes. So, oh, he's a foreign devotee. Oh, he's a Brahmin devotee. This is all Vaishnava Ninda. This is all Vaishnava Aparad. There's no such thing. They judge the Lord's devotees as per their body. Devotional service has nothing to do with our present birth, because bhakti is within the heart and can be brought out by the instructions of the spiritual master. For example, there is a clerk at the post office who is a revered caste Goswami. The local Babajis always go there and offer him respects again and again. So when we came to Vrindavan, he was still at the post office. There's a tiny little post office at Loy Bazaar. And he would sit there. And it was the only post office at the time, so we'd have to walk down there, give all the temple letters down there. So we would see him there. We would see the Babajis going and offering their respects to him. It was going on. Just because he was a caste Goswami, even the Babajis would offer him respects. But even that supposedly exalted Goswami is puffed up about his own caste by birth. He was a clerk he was a postmaster. Sri Nityananda Prabhu, the best of lords, smashes these misconceptions to pieces But remarkably, it's the Nityanandavans who maintain that you have to be a Brahmin, you can only take initiation from the Nityanandavans, so it's all upside down. Although Nityananda Prabhu was the most merciful, who was able to, he would even go, anything that he did would be acceptable, because as a Supreme Lord, he was ready to take the greatest risks to uplift people. Section 24, revival needed in Vrindavan. I have personally seen these things going on in the holy land of Vrindavan Dham. Therefore, I can understand there is some work to be done here, and Prabhupada's doing that work. There are many pretentious Prakrita Sahajiyas, busily engaged in outright debauchery. They seduce others' wives and try to relish a mundane imitation of transcendental Leela. So it's no different now. The Prakrita Sahajiyas are still walking amongst us. These are not the ecstatic devotional moods of the transcendental abode of Vrindavan Dham. Oh, my dear mind, please continually remember the lotus feet of the 6 Goswamis. Since the time when the 6 Goswamis arrived in Vrindavan on the order of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and preached true religious principles, the practice of devotional service has indeed flourished everywhere. Section 25. Don't imitate, just preach. The 6 Goswamis are the Lord's externally liberated associates. Not externally, eternally liberated associates. And they continuously remember the pastimes of Radha and Krishna. Their confidential practice of such remembrance, Leela Smarana, vanquishes all the sins of fallen souls. If someone simply imitates the Goswamis by artificially adopting their dress and behavior, then he is immediately captured by Maya and is never allowed to escape from the material world. You'll see so many people walking around with the half dhotis and the dupatta, and they think that now that I put the vesh of a Babaji, I'm on the same level as the Goswamis. Never allowed to escape the material world, Prabhupada says. Just preach the Lord's message to the fallen souls, continually going from door to door. By the grace of that preaching, your life will become truly successful. How many of you have ever gone door to door Sankirtan? It's not so popular now, but we used to go door to door, Sankirtan in the streets and door to door, and you would have to become so humble when you knock on someone's door, they see someone dressed as a Vaishnava, and you beg them, please chant Hare Krishna, please take a book, please come to our temple, please. Such humility when you have to go door to door. So this is what Srila Prabhupada, he's saying we have to do. By the grace of that preaching, your life will become truly successful. My spiritual master, Sri Barshabhanavi Daita Das, has given the following instructions. This is from Dushtaman 19. Chant the holy name in a loud voice. This is his foremost commandment. So this is what Srila Prabhupada initiated all over the world, this Sankirtan movement, chanting in a loud voice. Chanting in a loud voice means Sankirtan. Japa, according to the definition given by Rupa Goswami in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, japa is meant to be chanted just for the person chanting japa to hear with his own ear. So it doesn't mean that we chant our japa in a loud voice. Japa is just for the personal development of the person chanting japa. And loud voice means Sankirtan. And this is what Lord Chaitanya wanted spread in every town and village. 26. Pure kirtan replaces radios and newspapers. However, this performance of congregational chanting is not limited only to the traditional form that is accompanied by beating on drums. All modern communication systems can be used, even if they do not currently transmit the sweet sound of pure kirtan. So in the days when Prabhupada was writing this, 1962, 1958, the most popular form of mass media was the radio. So Prabhupada, he uses the word radio here. All things truly useful for the service of Hari are spiritually non-different from Lord Madhava. For in actuality, the sole enjoyer of everything in the three worlds is Lord Yadava. So this is the Yukta Vairagya principle that was taught by Rupa Goswami. That whatever has been created, we have to learn how to use in the Lord's service. So Prabhupada is saying here, not only by the Sankirtan of the beating of drums, but any way, anything that you can use, and Srila Prabhupada did that, and Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati also did that. He rode in cars, he sent his sannyasis on boats out of India. Anything that he could use to spread Krishna consciousness, the Sankirtan movement, he was intelligent enough because everything in the three worlds belongs to Lord Yadava. Maya's deluding potency is perfectly expressed in the blaring mundane noise of the radios we hear everywhere. Just put an end to all this nonsense by replacing it with continual broadcasts of transcendental kirtan. So yesterday I was reading the 3rd volume of Chasing Rhinos with the Swami. And Srila Prabhupada, sometimes in one day, he would do 3 programs. Anywhere, on television, on radio, at churches, at yoga centers, at temples, any way he could, Srila Prabhupada would preach the message of Krishna consciousness. He had no restrictions, but when he was asked to stay overnight in a Mayavadi yoga ashram, he sat there for 5 minutes. He says, "Take me out of this place." If he was not actively preaching, he would not be willing to stay in any of these places. But in order to preach, he would even go to radio stations. Radio stations are these little glass boxes with just the DJ and the person speaking. All types of austerities. And Prabhupada would make record albums. He made thousands of cassette tapes. He used everything in Krishna's service. All the mundane newspapers endlessly carried trivial, intolerable chattering about Maya's endless distractions. Just counteract all this by publishing the Lord's glories and distributing these newspapers everywhere in the world. You'll notice this week, all over the newspapers and the media are the Rath Yatras being held by ISKCON all around the world. They say now that the New York Rath Yatra is the biggest Rath Yatra in the world. So it's just like Prabhupada said that Lord Jagannath will come out of the Jagannath Puri temple because the foreign devotees are not allowed to go in. So Lord Jagannath now is going all over the world with his Rath Yatra. We're on the last section now. Loud kirtan causes real advancement. By sitting in a solitary room, pretentiously calling out to the Lord, you may increase your bile secretion, that's pitta vriddhi. But by spending even 10 million births in this way, you never will actually please Sri Hari. Sri Hari cannot be claimed by some Babajis as their exclusive property. Just come out of your tiny little cage and stop raising so many objections. Everyone belongs to Sri Hari, and Sri Hari belongs to everyone. Go on chanting kirtan with loudly raised voices. This is the Lord's personal instruction to all of us. By the potency of that kirtan, the process of Lila Smarana, remembrance of the Lord's daily pastimes, will spontaneously arise. Only then the qualification for solitary worship within the heart will be genuinely attained. Signed, Sri Abhay Charan Bhaktivedanta, editor of Back to Godhead. So this is Srila Prabhupada's direct announcement to the Babajis who say preaching is ruining this Lila Smarnam. No, Prabhupada says just the opposite. By the potency of that kirtan, the process of Lila Smarana, remembrance of the Lord's daily pastimes, will spontaneously arise. And even the Babajis must admit that when they do their Lila Smarana side by side, they have Lord Chaitanya's pastimes and they have Radha Krishna's pastimes. And Lord Chaitanya, while engaged in loudly chanting Hare Krishna amongst his associates, during this Sankirtan, that's how one becomes absorbed in the Lila Smaranam of the Lord. So this is the great benefit of this Sankirtan movement. By chanting Hare Krishna in association with other devotees through Sankirtan, this is the real way to enter into the eternal pastimes of the Lord. Hare Krishna. Jai.